hear the details of who I am and what I'm going to talk about. And what does that mean is the real question. For reference, if you want to go and see this afterwards, there's a URL to the actual presentation. I'm going to talk about low-code development platforms, and that's a buzzword in the industry these days about the variety of ways of building applications without having to type programming languages. And in fact, you have to do a lot of stuff still, but you don't have to remember whether there's a semicolon after the if parenthesis, close parenthesis statement. And it's that kind of thing and more so. So let's see if I can get here. I'm always amused at this particular idea that if you gave me 2 more weeks, I could give you a 5-minute speech, but I didn't have enough time, so it's going to take me an hour and a half. And Mark Twain is one of the people who has claimed credit or has been quoted as, but I've heard a lot of people quoted at making that statement. And that's probably the same for this show. I'm not sure 5 minutes, but I could have made it less, but I will try not to make it be an hour and a half. Let's see how I do. So the background is that, and this is a lot of these are sort of congruent with my opinion about programming, of which my background is that I was a programmer or leader of a set of programmers for my entire career. But I always noticed that when our developers really knew the target users very well, that the application is more likely to do what the client wanted to have happen. And so here we have an illustration of a user, and we have an illustration of your typical developer. There is a big gap in between them. And I've often held that if the user could just be the developer, you'd have a much more satisfied user. Another observation is that over the years, there are lots of different iterations of an application, especially every time a person releases that application, they think this is pretty much it. This is going to satisfy them. And I think that's probably not, because I think successful applications undergo many iterations based upon the target user's responses to the previous version. It's user feedback. And no matter how many times you talk about this, programmers don't include that in the timeline of what it's going to take to build a good application. The systems that I'm going to talk about are built on the concept that many applications are similar, or there's a lot of applications that are similar. I'm not going to say that every application is the same as every other one, and that there's never going to be any need to go down to the verbs and nouns of a programming language. But by and large, in business especially, many different applications are the same. They just have different names and different colors and different images and different categories. So, for example, here is and I'm focusing on smartphone apps because I think that's an important place that's where you're going to meet more people. Let's put it that way. Applications built for a smartphone. So here's an application listing the staff members, where they're located, who their managers are, the relationships between people, things of that sort. Another category of application that are used in businesses are assets, whether they're computers or they're programs or they're office supplies. There's people do keep lists of things, and they sometimes need to look them up, or where are they at this particular point. And another type are events. Either it's a calendar, or it's a bug report, or it's some sort of violation of something that people want to know. It's nice to be able to look them up. And playing to this need of people, to have these standard kind of applications seems to be another place where we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. We should just be able to take a set of applications and tailor them to this particular use at this time. Another observation is that people are generally better at understanding visualizations than detailed descriptions. So on the left, we get the programmer's view of the world of how something is done. The other way to express that is in a visual way. Do something for each item, and then is this the last item in the list, and add a period if it is, or a semicolon if it isn't. I thought to myself, well, how do you ever get out of this? But but that's the do something for each item. It automatically exits that way. But the point is, the right side of the screen is much more acceptable by most people than the left side. And by the way, please do interrupt if you take exception to this stuff. This is spoken from the point of view of a person who was a programmer, understands both sides, but actually favors the right side. So what are, yeah.
I had, when I first taught myself a little bit of programming, I read a book by someone called McCracken, and he suggested doing flow diagrams before you wrote the program.
Right. And programmers, young Turks say, they say, bah, I don't need that stuff. I'll just have that image in my head. And they probably do. But it's us old guys that need that kind of thing. And I think there are more people like us in the world than there are the young Turk programmers. And it's why people are saying we have a crisis on our hands. Who's going to do all the programming that's going to be needed to be done in the future? And I think the kind of system I'm talking about is the only way we're going to, it isn't by sending them all to MIT or to boot camp. That's not the solution to it. It's make the programming systems easier to use.
And
Harry, yes.
I just want to take one exception. I mean, I remember even when I was in grad school back in the 70s, flowcharts went out of favor very quickly because they were all about go-tos. And the one of the beauties of the way we normally code is the structure, which often is invisible. And
yes, I think what you're saying is we need to step up higher level of semantics in the primitives of our system. So the go-tos, which are a hack to get out of wherever you are, don't have to be done. It's expressed do for everything until you're finished, as opposed to if you've exceeded the index of the largest number, and then go to something like that. But you're right. I think flowcharts showing go-tos are doing it wrong. The primitives need to be a higher level than that. Someone else had a question?
Yeah, Harry, I was just going to pile on Larry's comment, is that when I was working with a group of developers, I was always tempted to take away their keyboard when I first gave them a project, just so that they won't have the desire to start with solutioning as soon as you told them what the problem was, and that you get a chance to think it through. And I required that before they coded, they present the flow chart of what they were doing, just to Larry's point, to understand.
I don't think that's, I think that's a good idea. And I think actually, let's go back. We can go further than that and say, look, if we can express what we want to do in a flow chart, then why not make use of the flow chart in the production of the eventual solution? Because typically what a programmer does at that point is, oh yeah, okay, so I satisfied that requirement, and now let's get back to the coding pad and keyboard and hack this thing out. And
well, you have to remember that way back when there was no IDEs, so you didn't have.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. No, you're right. And exactly.
Integrated development environments, if you don't know the acronym.
Right, and that's really what I'm talking about. but even, I mean, integrated development environments are as complex, if not more complex, than some of the old systems. And so that isn't necessarily in and of itself the complete solution. Let me get
Right.
back to this now. So there was a Forrester report that came out in 2014 that I found, and I'm just going to read this to you. Low code development platforms are those that enable rapid delivery of business applications with a minimum of hand coding and a minimal upfront investment in setup, training, and deployment. In other words, they take care of the latter three things. Maybe the training is, I would quibble with that, but certainly getting started and deploying is pretty easy. The hand coding, well, we'll see. I have to tell you that I love the idea, and I think we're still not even close to getting there. But let's see. So, whoops, what did I say? There was going to be some glitches here. Okay. So, all right. So what are the kinds of things that you look for? Well, in terms of data, many people's data fit into a very simple model of data. It typically is a table of some form with rows and columns. And it has, and the thing that's important is that have a wide variety of data types. So it shouldn't be the case that the rows, the cells of that table can only contain text and numbers. They have to be able to contain images, and they have to be able to contain voice and all sorts of things like that. So it has to be completely general. But once you have, you say that's going to be the model of data that I adopt. The next thing is, what can you do with those data items? And you're gonna, I would say you want to have some sort of visual interface to describe what you're going to do with those data items. You want to use templates to create visualizations of data, because although you can invent one way of showing a row, you don't want to have to change it every time. So you want to use a template that you use to show every row which is in the database. You want to have a lot of good actions for control. But even more than that, you should not ignore the fact that many applications are the same. So they say business applications. Well, what's wrong with having a good one that's generic and then copying it and adapting it for your own use? And that's one of the things that I think people sort of say, oh, well, that is based upon, people learn, I think, best through examples. You can have you can show me the nouns and verbs of a language, but unless you let me watch TV to see how it's actually spoken, I won't really have a clue. Or you sit among a large number of people who are speaking a language, you won't really know how it's used. You can't just do it from the rules. So this large inventory of example applications is really helpful in using any programming system, but it's not bad in terms of these systems. So normal people, and by normal people, I mean non-programmers, understand quite well the concept of a template, which acts in an adjustable way to visualize information. And the adjustable way are the values so here's a item, and the adjustable pieces are the values of each of the cells in that row. So the point is you'll display this row exactly the same way you show this row, except for the fact that the parameters are a little different. And so basically we say in this particular case, the template is basically saying take an image and take a name and put the image above the name and put them close to each other. And so that's the visualization. And it might be something like this: a picture of the Battle of Lexington Green and a label underneath it. And the example that I talked about earlier of rushing up to the last minute of a presentation to create your presentation with all these wonderful tools. I was about to try and show you another row, but I failed. So a little hit for people who produce these things, be careful in the last hour for your presentation. Okay, so there are a lot of these things, and I would say there's many of these low-code development platforms appearing every day. The one that I have been using is one called Glide, and Glide is built from a Google spreadsheet, and they say build an app from Google spreadsheet in 5 minutes for free. Well, none of that is particularly true, or it's not five. I took me 6 months to build the app that I did, and it isn't free. It cost me $100 a year to use all the features, but that's not bad. I can deal with that. But they get the spirit apart. That's the spirit they talk about. And what I'd like to do now is show you a little film, 1 minute, I think it is, by Glide's in-house presenter, who is a very smooth guy. He's English, and you fall in love with his accent and his preciseness. And tell me if you're not captivated by this.
Glide makes spreadsheets even more powerful, more shareable, and more fun by turning them into beautiful custom apps that you can use for work, personal projects.
I don't see the video. Do other people see the video?
Here's how it works. In Glide, I click New App, pick a spreadsheet, and Glide automatically creates a basic app as a starting point. I can adjust the layout and design. I can add components that connect to the data in my sheet. And I can add actions so users can change and update the data. The app works on phones, tablets, the web, and doesn't require an app store. The coolest thing is my app and the spreadsheet stay in sync, so changes to the spreadsheet flow directly to my app. And as different users change or upload their data, it immediately writes back to my sheet. Everything stays in sync. We can't wait to see what you build.
So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff they do. And in fact, almost all of their documentation is done in using video. I shouldn't say that's not quite true. There is a reference manual, but they really do focus on this sort of notion that people want to see things happen. Perhaps a little, I'll talk a little bit more about this company at the end to express a little bit my feelings about this thing.
Glide makes spreadsheets even more.
Let's see, what do I do? Here we go. Okay, so one of their goals that they still state on their website is that Glide's mission is to create 1 billion new software developers by 2030, and that's an interesting goal. 1 billion developers is I don't know. I'm sure it's more than there are today. A lot more. And in order to do that, they're going to have to change a lot of things to avoid all the phobias that so-called non-technical people have about programming. But yeah, I understand what they're trying to do. So here are some examples of smartphone apps built with Glide. And I built the first 4 of these. And these are a couple of other ones that I'll talk about. The first one, in my piece de resistance that I spent 6 months doing, is a smartphone app that has a set of walking tours of Lexington. My wife is very involved in the Historical Society, and she wanted to do some walking tours. And I said, well, let's not print them on paper and have people holding them. Why don't we use a smartphone to do as much as we possibly can? And so I will show you that one. So I'm not going to show the other ones. The other ones are simpler, actually. This one, my son shamed me when he looked at me one day with this big wallet in my back pocket, saying, "Why do you have a wallet? Why did you use your smartphone for all that?" And so I took him up on it, and I saw what I could do by eliminating as many cards in my wallet as possible, and instead put images of the front and back of those cards on an app on my phone. Now, what people have frequently said, well, isn't that what the Apple Wallet is for? Well, it turns out the Apple Wallet is only for commerce. If it has a dollar value and a transaction that Apple can make some money off, they're interested in it. But if it's just holding a picture, they're not interested in doing it, and they won't let you do it with the wallet. So that was just, there were too many people in front of me to make it possible for me to do what I wanted to do. So I built this little app, and it didn't, well, the first version of it didn't take very long, but as usual, you iterate and iterate, and it gets more complex. Another one was when I had my knee operated on, my PT gave me a whole set of exercises to do. And I said, that would be an interesting thing. You know, I'm much more interested in programming than I am in doing the exercises. So that was part of my PT activities. Another one was my son lives in Brookline in a condo, and he's constantly asking me to fix stuff for him. And I kept losing track of what he wanted. And so I built this little app to keep track of requests he made of me to do stuff. And then I said, well, let's generalize a little bit. It's not just Will's condo in Brookline, but it's also my house in Lexington. And in general, because I'm on the board of directors of the condo, general things in the condo, not just his particular unit. So I have 3 different collections of things there. I don't use this one very much. It was fun to create, but I don't use it. This one is where I originally found out about Glide. And when the Lexington Visitors Center, the economic development force in Lexington, not the Visitor Center, put out this website of all the things you can do in Lexington. I was really impressed. I really liked the way it worked, and that just struck me as that's where I got started, and I produced this Lexington by Foot and Phone. And then finally, there is a tour de force app that is out there with this guy again, it's a pretty good illustration of what can be done. The problem with video, of course, doing most of your stuff by video, is making updates to it is hard compared to making updates to a reference manual or something like that, where you can just selectively change what's going on. So that these things tend to get behind. Okay, so what I want to show you now is a real good example of what you can do with Glide. And here's the concept of these walking tours, that they're in the front. When you first come into this, there's a collection of tours that are represented, and you can click on any one of the tours and they'll take you to a tour. This one is the Lexington Battle Green, and one of the things about that tour is the first stop. And here is the first stop on the tour, Buckman Tavern. And then from Buckman Tavern, you can go to the Minuteman statue, and from the Minuteman statue, you can go to, and there are basically 9 or so stops on the tour in the area of the Battle Green. And so that's basically what you'll see in this particular tour. And now I'm going to switch over to my iPhone and try and show you. Okay, so I have to do a little bit of change. Okay. Okay.
See your phone.
There it is. Okay. So this is my phone, and here is. Let me just get rid of this. Here is the first page of that phone. that app. This is like, and it has all sorts of stuff in it. And let me just go down the screen to show you the types of media type you can put in this. You're not
Harry, we
seeing
just see the screen mirroring image. We
You
don't see the actual app.
You don't, eh? Really? Okay, let me try that again. I told you this would be exciting. Let's see.
This is a demo. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Go wrong.
Yeah, right.
Go wrong.
You mentioned that just before you joined, Peter.
Yeah, sorry.
Let me try this again.
We see the screen mirror. We see a screen mirroring selection screen.
Okay. So that's actually, that's my iPhone. And now you see the control panel?
No, we still see screen mirroring.
Really?
So there's another thing you could do, which I do a lot with my students to see what they're working on, is have your phone join the Zoom. And if you enable audio on the phone and disable audio on your computer, then speaker view will do the right thing. Oh, actually, I guess you don't, it doesn't matter if you're going to share the screen anyway.
This is so discretionary. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm hoping that is. Let's not dwell on that, because I think you're gonna be able to. Let's see. How do I get out of this? Let's see. All right. Stop sharing there. I'll have to, John. I'll have to find that out from you, but not now. Okay.
Harry, can I just mention one thing? What I've sometimes been able to do is use the second camera, share the contents of the second camera, and have that aim at the device.
Another interesting idea. I don't have a second camera other than I can hold it in front of my. It's to really honest with you, folks. It's not that necessary. I can go back one screen and pretty much show you everything that's done. That's why I sort of included this. It really is. There's lots of different media types in this. Each one of these pages is quite detailed. We recognize that people are not going to read things. And so everything is right at the top. You can press one of these buttons and it will speak everything on the screen to you. And I did that using Google synthesized voices, which are actually quite good these days. I didn't have the luxury, with the exception of one of the tours, of having a voiceover artist do the speaking. Actually, the Lexington Battle Green tour is done by a person who was a professional, but the rest of them are not too bad. So there's a graveyard. Well, both of these tours are done by a voiceover artist, but there are several other tours in this collection. And in the collection, there are, I'll just read them off to you, the types of tours. There's the old burying ground. There's Hancock Street architecture, East Village, the Monroe District, all of the houses in Lexington on the National Register of Historic Places. There's a tour of the 15-mile 11th stop mid-century modern houses in Lexington. And then finally, there's a Miriam Hill architecture tour. And Marcia has 3 more tours in the waiting for me to work on this again. So yeah, this is a nice way of being able to expand things over time without having to have physical markers be installed in Lexington. It just isn't going to happen. And so we sort of said, let's give people a placeholder of this whole collection of walking tours, and then they can use the phone and all of the features of the phone. For example, mapping, directions, showing you where you are compared to where you want to be, things of that sort.
Are they up and running now?
Excuse me?
Are they up and running now?
Absolutely. Yep. And if you go to this particular website, tourlex.glideapp.io, you can see it for yourself on actually any device, whether it's a laptop or a smartphone or a tablet. So that should work on all different things. Okay, so getting past that, let's talk about building a Glide app for our own group.
Harry,
And,
just a quick question, please. You said
Yeah.
it's available on all the apps. That means that the application that you chose, this Glide app, has a device-specific layer that translates the application based on where it's being presented. It has a UI layer, if you will.
Yes, it does. It does take care of the differences between different devices. And it uses, what's they refer to that?
Presentation
it's like-
layer?
well, it's not, they don't talk.
Industry is adaptive response. So
Yeah, or
monitor.
I'm forgetting the term. It's one key word, like responsive or something of that sort. They've given up that layer thing that used to be what we talked about. But
Yeah,
you're
so
right.
an
It's
old part.
essentially that. Yeah. And the idea is that, there's a little difference, which is they don't have to cover every single different physical device, because this is all delivered over the web through a web browser. And so they really only have to address multiple web browsers being able to display it correctly. However, they do take into consideration the dimensions of the screen when figuring out what to show on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to this, and I'll answer some more questions like that at the end if I can. Let's try and build a Glide app for our group. And I tried to sort of say, well, what describes our group? What's it all about? Well, we have meetings, we have people, we have presentations, both presentations in the past that we might like to have a catalog of. And we do have a catalog of all this stuff on the wiki, but not something you can carry around in your pocket and use very well. And in the future, what's coming up? We have these unusual meetings that are called planning meetings, and it's also potpourri meetings. And then finally, there's the schedule of dates and times and locations of meetings. And if you were to build an app for that particular group, those are all the things you might need to talk about. And in fact, you might want to talk about the relationships. For example, in the questionnaire I sent out to people, thank you very much. 22 people answered that. I asked people to write down what their interests are, or to select what their interests are. Well, you might be interested in saying, well, who else is interested in gardening? And get a list of members in this group who are interested in gardening. So that's not just your standard list of people. It's a relationship between the people. Another relationship might be talks, which person gave which talk, or talks that were about computers, which ones were about computers, and which people gave those talks. So there are a lot of other things beside the individual meetings, people's presentations, planning, and schedule that you might want to think about. Okay. So my point is, you really, before you start off, and this is a little bit about Peter's thing, is take the time to understand what you're building. I say that after having been a programmer for all my life, and I'm 74 now, and I still have to struggle to stop and do that before I get started. And frequently I don't do it. I see how it goes, is like, see what I can do, and then think through that problem all the time. Whoops. Okay. There we go.
Step away from
So-
the keyboard, rule one.
So what is it like? So first, some generic issues. Start off with a clear idea about what you want to build, and be sure you can build it in Glide. And that's the thing, of course, if you typically you come to one of these systems not knowing anything about it, you come to it with a problem and you're not really sure whether you're going to be successful or not. At least that's the way I am. But you got to take a chance. And so this is basically a short description. And let's start off with the members. There's no point in starting off with something that is not going to be of interest to the audience today. Second thing is design a spreadsheet to hold your data. So frequently spreadsheets are given, by database people, spreadsheets are given a really a slow or not very much credit. But almost everybody understands rows and columns. And of course, it is not the full doodads of a relational database or blah, blah, blah. But in fact, most people won't understand relational databases. Rather, this simple two-dimensional rows and columns is a pretty good way to represent data. And the rows, if you have a database called members, the rows represent the individual members, and the columns are the attributes that distinguish one member from another one. And that's a general principle of these systems. And so we come up with a layout like that, which is, and I'll show you a little more the detail of exactly what happened when you guys filled out the form. And then finally, just design some sort of template that describes how objects ought to look on the screen. And whoops. And this is a view of the Glide interface showing the smartphone, what's being shown in the smartphone. It shows, and you can't see this, but it's a list of sources of data in this area. This is a template for a particular screen, which is what you're seeing here. And these items are the adjustments to the template to get it to do, to the individual lines of a template to get it to do what you want. And you'll see that in much larger detail in just a second. But okay, so those are some of the things that you have to do.
Harry, David has his hand up. He wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, David.
David, you have your hand up. Do you want to talk?
No, I sorry, I did not. I must touch a button by mistake. Sorry.
Twitch.
All right.
Happens to me all the time. No problem. Okay. And yes, thank you for pointing out, because I'm just looking, I'm not even looking at anybody when I give this talk. Lovely. Know your audience. So the next thing you want to figure out now for each type of operation, for each member, what do you want to allow to be done? So you want to be able to create new instances of an object. Do you want to be able to from the application, or do you want to be able to modify existing instances of objects, and then come in all the access control and stuff like that issues? And whoops. So think about the kinds of things that you're going to do, need to do at some point without overwhelming yourself on work. And then finally, what are all those attributes, the column labels? And in the case of a member, it might be the town they live in, the profession they had, the interests they currently have. Okay, so you all, or many of you, filled out the Google form that I sent around, and I just wanted to show you how it came into me. It came in as a Google spreadsheet. It had a special name, this responses thing, and then timestamps and first names and last names. your photograph, your town, your state. This is the list of vocations, the list of avocations, and your email address. And actually, I wish I had thought this through a little further, because I said, gee, it would have been nice to know what companies they worked for, and also what if there's a URL for a resume. That would have been nice to have too, but I didn't do that. But I added it later on so that in the future we can do that. But it's pretty simple. And that's what I started with when doing the rest of the development that I did. Okay, so now I'm going to switch, and this will be a little easier because I certainly, well, famous last words. So I'm going to switch over to let's see. Oh, maybe it's this. It's the same screen, maybe. Not this one, but this one. And now I'm going to go out of the presentation. And instead, there's the presentation. Now I'm going to go over to, here is that responses thing. And here's how I took those responses and put them into a more general purpose or enhanced version of that. I copied all the data from here. Yes.
We see a screen that says demo and switch to demo screens.
You do. Let's see.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I appreciate it. This.
It feels more professional when things don't work.
Yeah, right. Maybe. How about that? Are you seeing now a spreadsheet?
Bingo.
Yes.
Okay. And now here is my taking that data and doing some value added things to it. So for example, I took the first and last names and put them together as a readable name. And I took city and town and state and made them into town, comma, state. And what else did I do here? Maybe that's it. Oh, and I did add these extra two, but I only added them for me just to see if it would work. Okay. And then I took the interests, and the interests essentially were the combine your vocation and avocation interests and put them into one string. And then using my knowledge of spreadsheets, I split that list by commas into all of the various things that you were interested in. Okay. So Charlie had a large number of interests. And who else here has a Michael Harris? I think he was the champion for having the most number of things. But you know, you got to be able to anticipate that you're going to get other people. So here's the list, broken out list of interests. And that's going to come into use later on when I do showing how things relate to each other. And then finally, we come over to
you
where
need
is
to click
what?
on the tab, Harry, to show us the interest.
Are you seeing sheets? What is the name of this? Sheets for copy?
Responses.
Oh, you're still seeing responses. Jesus, what the hell happened here? You see responses.
Highlight the Sheets tab at the top
Yeah, click on a different tab.
in your title bar.
Are
Click.
you seeing now?
No,
Did you
click
see
on
anything
it.
change then?
Nothing changed.
You may have to restore the share.
Okay.
Click on it to highlight it, then reshare.
Does that have one column in
Better
yellow
now.
and
Better.
okay? That's sorry. That's strange. Okay. And all right. So you see here's the concatenation of both vocational and avocational interests. And here they are broken out into individual. And of course, this is annoying. Brings the programmer, you got to get back to the programmer of you. It turns out that you'll notice that there are leading spaces here in the right around here. And I had to go through in a little more stuff and get rid of all those to make it actually work. But you get the idea. Okay, so let's see what happens now. Do I have to I can't just, are you seeing something different now?
No.
Okay.
And Harry, you don't have to close down the share. You hit share and just start a new share. It'll jump over to the new share without actually closing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
In other words, each tab is a separate process.
Gotcha. How's that?
Chat.
Are you seeing something that says chat? Excellent. So now you are seeing the interface to Glide. Okay. And there's nothing there. This is a whole new thing. So Glide is basically, it shows a screen. At the bottom of the screen, although there's nothing there right now, it'll show a list of tabs. And I can put a new tab onto this by just putting this plus here, and bringing this up here. And it picks out, I had already told it a spreadsheet to use. It picks out the first sheet in that spreadsheet, and that happened to be the members sheet. So I'm going to change the name of this to be members. Okay.
And we're not seeing this either, Harry.
You're not seeing, what are you seeing now?
I just see the plain chat, the vanilla chat with no change, nothing members, nothing like that.
Yeah, we tend to see snapshots. I don't know if you can grab your wife's PC and put it in the same room and have it view what we're seeing.
Well, I could use my,
Don't panic. We're good.
I'm not panicking, although let's see.
Just a little.
Just a little, yeah. Okay.
What if you share a whole screen instead of just a window?
Yeah, that would work also.
Sharing your full desktop will show. all the
That's what
changes.
I've done in the past. How's that?
Got it.
We're better.
Okay, and you see my pointer?
Yeah.
And okay, and if I do this, you see something happen?
Yes.
Yes.
All good.
Okay. All right. Lesson for us to advise other developers or presenters, share your screen. Okay. So now this is what I want. And you'll notice that without doing any work at all, it has picked up a fair amount of stuff. It made a lot of mistakes, but it got me started. And I think that's important for everybody to have a little bit of success without having to do an awful lot of work. I recognize what's happening here. It's basically listing all the people who put their who answered the thing. It didn't offer them in alphabetical order, the wrong names, blah, blah, blah. So let me go and fix some things. So again, here are all the tabs in this, right here. We see one tab, and its default is to say list all the items in that particular sheet. And what it did was it listed them all. Now, I can select this, and on the right side here, we see various things. And obviously, the title, which I happen to know is not the first name, should not be, but rather the full name. Okay, there we go. Now the full name is showing. Are you seeing that now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. And let's get rid of this other thing here by just sort of saying, don't put anything in that field. And so now we have a pretty good list of the people with their proper names. It isn't in alphabetical order. So let's see if I go down here. Yes.
Sorry.
It's right in the middle.
Right here. And instead of doing sheet order, why don't I say do it by the alphabetical of the last name? So now I've got the whole thing in alphabetical order. Okay, that's great. That's looking pretty good. I'm sorry about the folks who didn't offer their picture, so I chose Homer and Marge as the alternative missing face. But here is the first thing without me doing anything to show off a person's record. And in fact, does a pretty good job. Is Peter's email address and his interests and his avocations. And in fact, if I want to send Peter an email, I could click on this and it fires up my email program and with addressed to him. So that was all pretty good. And if you were on a smartphone, it would do it with whatever the smartphone's mail application was. But let's not do that. Let's get rid of that. And we'll go back to, what did I do? Oops. No. Oh, I see. All right, so there we go. Peters, okay, yeah. So there's that. And if we look at others, we can. Let's look at John's, and nice picture, John, very nice. And it sort of gives a, you could use this when you go back from a meeting and say, who was that guy, or who was that girl, and you are able to figure it out. Oh, and he doesn't live in Lexington. That's great. He lives in Stowe. And in fact, I was astonished to find out that we have somebody who lives in Olympia, Washington, coming to our meetings, which is great. So we don't realize what reach we have with all these things. Okay, so what else can I show you? Okay, so I have this cheat sheet that I wrote. Okay, so what I want to do now is say, well, members is great, but it'd be nice if we had something about somebody coming in and looking at this. What's this group all about? So I'm going to put a new tab here. I'm going to put it in the beginning, and I'm going to name it not members, but home. And I'm going to choose the spreadsheet home, and I'm going to take a look at this and change the details a little bit. And here is a sheet that I created. And let me show you that sheet as a spreadsheet. It's right here. And you're seeing that it's a very simple spreadsheet. It has a bunch of fields and blocks of text, primarily pointed to a picture. And so I set this up ahead of time just to make sure it would work, unlike some parts of this talk. And what I'd like to do is adjust this so we get the right things in the right places. And let's see. If I, okay. Let's see, maybe it is this. Let's see.
While you're looking, I have a question. Can other people access this and modify it? For example, I was reading what you said about the computer club, and I thought if you got Al Sherman or someone like that, they could give you a better history.
Sure. I mean, well, I'll show you in a little bit how you could actually make it so this stuff is under access control, is modifiable from the phone itself.
Well,
Okay.
I guess my point is, can other people modify?
Yes, whoever has access to it. Absolutely. I could give you access to this particular page, and then you would log in and you'd be able to access it. Okay. So,
Yeah.
So here, let's just try and figure this out. Okay. So what I really want to do is, oh, I see what the problem is. Okay. So what I really want to do is not have this here because it's blocking out the image. Okay. And the first thing I want to do is put in, let's see how to do this. Okay, so I should say, how do you get the elements for a template? Well, you get them by pressing one of these buttons, and you see a whole list of things you can put in a template. Okay, and I'm going to actually put in something simple called text, and I'm going to put it up here. And I'm going to change its value over here. And it's going to be custom. And it's going to say about the group. Okay. And there it is. And I'm going to say, let's make this be bold. I happen to know that headline 4 makes it bold. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take another one of these things. And over here, I'm going to say, instead of saying about the group, it's going to get description 1 in there. And instead of being bold, I'm going to make it be regular. Okay, so there, and instead of, it should be there. Okay, so now we have the first paragraph. The second paragraph, I believe, yes. So this is, I really don't need it. So I need it to be more like this one. So I'm going to duplicate it. This little button allows me to duplicate it. And instead of description 1, it's going to be description 2. Okay. So there's the second paragraph. And now what I want to add is another one of these things. So I'll do that and put it down here and make that be about the members. Okay. And I don't want this here anymore. Okay. And I'd like this to be more like this one. So I'll duplicate it and bring it down and have this be about the group. This should be 3. I'm not going to do any more than this, but you get the idea that I can create a very nice description of what the group is all about. And indeed, this could be adjusted by somebody else than me. And I can delegate that responsibility by using some access control mechanisms. Okay, so that's the second tab. Oh, and oh, by the way, you'll notice that at the bottom of this, we have tabs. And of course, they don't have the right, let's see, where is it? Okay, so for example, the icons don't look right. So these are the members, and let's try searching for a PERS. There's one. That'll do. Okay, so now we have a proper thing there. Home, gosh, that's an easy one to do. It should be an easy one to do. I don't have a bunch of fish. Oh, pregnancy sperm, that's good. That's a good one. But let's make it look like a house. Okay. Let's see, now why is it coming this? I don't want this, but I forget how to do it at the moment, and I'm not going to struggle. Let me assure you that it would come in like this, given if I were to get the right things. And I will say that's what I just said there is indicative of experiences I've had with this system a lot. There's so much in it that it takes me a long time to remember where things are. And maybe that's part of to do with age, but it's also just human nature to forget things. So the learning curve on these systems is probably no larger than it would be to accomplish what I've accomplished if I had to know all the things that did this, if I was doing it in a regular programming language with a bunch of libraries that would cause all this stuff to happen properly. But still, it's not something that you want to just approach and think you're going to learn it in one day. Okay. And then finally, Yes,
Just a quickie. What you're showing us here is available without cost, or in order to do anything here, it costs something from Glide?
everything is without cost here.
You'll let us know
Everything
if you
I've-
get to the point where you need cost?
And there's nothing that I have in any of this application that has any cost associated with it. Of course, they would like you to have cost, and they do have smart ways of getting to the point where, okay, you've built this application, now you're starting to really use it. And after a certain amount of time, they will sort of say, oh, you've exceeded your capacity of free stuff. But for the purposes of a developer, this is more than adequate in terms of building stuff. I'm quite impressed with that. Of course, when I had to actually go pay for it, it bothered me but I did pay the $100. It was
So,
worth it by that time. They had sucked me in. Go ahead.
Harry, since they say that this can also be run as a web application, in that case, do they host it? How does that work?
They host everything.
Okay.
They host everything. This is all done using the Google Drive resources. This is not hosted on my machine by any means. No, this is a classic service providing all of the details of both the editing interface and the long-term storage. Much like most web-based development systems, like Weebly, for example, is another example of something that they host and serve all of the content.
Use the fancy acronym SAS, SAS,
Is that what that's called?
Software as a
That's a
Service.
service, yes.
Yeah, okay.
SAS, double A.
So I
Oh,
not
posted
sorry about that.
a link to the pricing. It's right
Yeah.
on their page. And, it's trialware. So when you get over 5,000 rows, for example, you need to pay.
Correct.
Below that, you don't. And there's other features that are constructed that way.
Yes. No, there's no
Comments am I advertising in?
there's no question that you will run into the limits if you get into a big application. In my fairly large application, or at least as far as I see it, I'm not even close in Lexington by foot and phone. Although there were a couple of features I needed that they said I couldn't use without going to be a pro. And I get a lot for it, to be quite honest with you. I have yeah.
One other thing here. Can I take this once it's built and port it to another environment? Is there anything to export this to my development environment? Once I get my proof of concept done and I really want to make this the next killer app?
No, I don't think that it would be in this company's interest to give you that capability. Is to take all of the relationships between, you certainly have all of the spreadsheets are your own. And you certainly have access to the list of template actions and all their parameters. You can see that. So if you wanted to port it over to another system, I don't know that you could do it mechanically without having to do some cutting and pasting and stuff like that. But you can work out all your details in this system. That's true. But whatever. That's not what I would choose to do. I would choose to use that app and now make some money off it and give them their share.
Well,
Well,
conversely,
it's
it's
a
a great
hosted
prototyping environment.
And they
It is a terrific.
all of it and so on. And there are verticals that I saw. For example, I saw real estate as a big vertical for them, where
Yep.
they have a package that there's all these developers and so on that'll customize it for you if you don't want to do it yourself. So that's their market. So hosted
Yep.
different verticals, you can customize or you can start from scratch, like Harry's doing here, and build it up yourself.
Exactly. So when I went into this, in particular on the tour thing, I looked around as to what was available that I could just take and change to be mine. There was nothing available, so I had to get down and dirty. I'm sure there are somewhere on their site, there might very well be a group app that does the same thing that or if there isn't, after I'm finished, I might actually offer it up to the community, saying, look, here's a group app, and I'll sell it to you for $100, and you can just take your data and put it in, and you don't have to worry about it. Or you can come in and you'd be able to adjust all of the graphics and things like that, make a copy of it, and I'd sell it to you for $100 or something like that. But it's not that I'm having you wouldn't have to pay $5,000 for it, which is the old metaphor of how this stuff happened. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to show you, and I think we have just about enough time, which is, so far this is, you can do some really neat stuff with this. I'd like to show you something that's a little more advanced, which is this notion of, I have members, but I'd like to actually have another tab, which is called interests. And what I did was basically here, I remember those things I broke out individual lines that were all the interests of things. Okay. And so I'm going to change it to be interests. And that's as good I don't know what that is, but that's fine. An icon for it. So I could either switch to my members or go home or go over to interests. And what I'd see here is all of the people who I'd see this list of interests. That's about the only thing I know that's happened so far. But for example, if I were to look for who are all the people interested in, why is there's something wrong here in terms of, if I go here and get rid of this, I'll get something that's a little more readable. Okay. And since there's no particular, it just chooses the first letter of the thing. But say I were to look at computers. Oh, this is interesting. It seems to have picked up all the people that put computers. Okay, so there's Frank's computers. He has it actually on both of them. And Steve computers. Yeah. And let's see. So all these people, the thing that they have in common is that they have computers on either their avocations or their vocations. Okay. And that's a pretty cool thing. And how did I get that? Well, it turns out that you can look at other things. You can look at one of the internal tables, and these are the so-called glide tables. And I believe I must have told it about this before, that I added a new column to the spreadsheet beyond, not in the spreadsheet, but rather just in this representation of things. And it was called common interests. And the definition of common interests are, I'm interested in interests where the value of in the interest column, those things that were broken out, match the interest in a member's list of interests. So take all of the interests and focus on an individual user and find the ones that match. And what you see here, and by the way, there is a bug somewhere in my stuff that is not getting interest for I believe it's single users interested, and I have to fix that, and I'll get back to you when I do that. But the point is, here is an administrator, and there appear to be two people who declare themselves to be interested in that. And so let's just check that out. And we'll go over to interests, and I'll say administrator. And here is Michael Harris, and he has administrator, and Carl, who has administrator also. So that seems to work. So it's a nice way of relating information in multiple rows with each other. And I have to say that this concept of relation is very powerful, and it's been the hardest thing for me to really get my head around and know when it's appropriate. I've understood how it might be appropriate here, but people use these relations for all sorts of things in terms of relating things in the spreadsheet database of information. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to demo to you. Now, I have a couple of last minute. Oh, one might ask, how do you actually, so I have not published this at all, but I'm about to publish it so that you can actually try it when you go home. Or you are home. Well, yeah. So anyway, there is this button over here which says publish. And I'm going to do that now. And it's so it's never been published. So I'm going to publish it.
Harry?
Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yeah.
From what you said, I take it you didn't find any quote unquote hello world app showing you from beginning to end how to do a trivial app. And
that's a very good observation. And I think it's a major fault. And I blame it on the developers who are building this, that
who else?
They have, who else? Yeah, I don't, by the way, being a developer, I have no problem blaming developers because I know how they behave.
Gonna blame on the marketing people.
They have no marketing people. It's only 5 people who did all this. There was 6 people. They're growing and they're young, so-called young, but I think they've been around long enough that they should have made more progress than this. One thing is that they're not spending money at the rate that a normal startup does. They're doing it on the cheap. And so as a result, they don't necessarily address all of the issues that a standard startup would, which is all the marketing stuff at the beginning. They're hoping that their community will help them market the thing. Let's see. Wait a second. It didn't work.
Do they have any connection to Google? I mean, Google might buy them at some point.
They might. I don't know. Yeah, that's possible. That's maybe what they're thinking. But in any case, let's name this LCTG. Okay.
But what it works, the QR code that's there just works.
The QR code does work. That's true. But I want to give it a web name. Oh, let's see. Okay. Lex, L-E-L, yeah, L-E-X, Computers and Technology Group. I'm sorry that we have to add those things to get that to happen. Okay, so it's going to allow me to do that. My app, just by doing that, it's published it as that. Okay, so my app is published. But you could take your cell phone and scan this with your camera, and you would be able to load this onto your cell phone. But if you wanted to look at what? Say again? I'm
there now. I'm doing it as you're talking.
Terrific. What a testimony. I appreciate that. I will send a message out to everybody showing you how to actually use the app that we did just develop in front of you. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is share. Oh, no, I don't have to do that anymore, I guess. Do I? No. No. I can now just go back to this piece, and everybody's seen the presentation now? Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay. So what are the pros and cons of Glide? Well, it's good for building company-specific business apps, fairly simple things. It's not going to be, the focusing the web space telescope, doing all the difficult calculations, but it might be a good user interface to images brought back by the telescope. It's particularly good at building information presentation applications. It has an excellent set of programming primitives for that particular task. And it's also the fastest way I've seen for building a sophisticated app in a platform independent way. I will say that once you get skilled at this, you can whip these things out really quickly, and useful apps. Some of the little ones that I did were very nice to do. The cons are that it's not so easy for non-programmers. It's not as easy as the developers think. And the reason for that is I don't think very many people are used to managing as much information in their head at one time as a programmer needs to in order to pull all the things together. And I tell you, I did swear at these guys for not really having things that I could study. They get most of their information in videos. And that is not a good way for me to think about things. The developers have an enthusiastic user community, mostly made up by excellent programmers. And they need to think about how to describe their system to non-technical users, because an awful lot of, they have a problem. They have to make their system really usable, and that requires all of the kind of things that programmers do. And it's a lot harder to generate that in a sort of a non-technical. It's the difference between Apple and Dell, or no, Apple and Microsoft, I guess is the difference. It's Apple does a lot beneath the covers for you, and Microsoft lets you see it all. But doing what Apple did is harder to do than letting you see everything. And then finally, a similar sort of vein, they're taking their input from too many sophisticated programmers and not enough from normal people, if you will. And so what is their key to success is stop adding features for a while and figure out the proper way of how to use their system. And I think that question about, is there an example of soup to nuts as to what I just sort of showed you today of how to create an app using their system? And the answer is, I don't think there is. None that I found useful, but it's possible that there is, and it's still too hard to create one so that you could say that was a legitimate improvement over what they have. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I certainly have complained to them about what are the fundamental concepts of this system, and I've never gotten a response. They need to understand that videos are great for some people, but not for others. And I'm one of the people that the videos start showing all the stuff and it goes whizzing by me, and I have to go back and slow down the video. And so I constantly come back to this. What are the metaphors? What's a good reference manual that I can look at slowly at my pace? I guess I'm repeating myself here, isn't it? Oh, I didn't flesh out this side of the thing. Okay, sorry about that.
So actually, what I do when there's video instructions is I have a desktop, so with a large screen. So I put the video on half of the screen, and I follow the instructions on the other half, because if you're going back and forth from the video, you have to remember a lot.
No, absolutely. I do the same thing, but sometimes it goes by so fast that I'd rather see it in a list of things on a page that I can track down myself.
Yeah, I agree with that.
An old guy talking about programming, I guess. Anyway, so they just released Glide 2.0. And I'm asking myself, is Glide headed in the right direction? So what I wanted to show you was the first video and the second video. And I hope
Just as clarification, Harry, we used Glide 2.0 in this demo today?
Yes. Oh, there was no choice. It switched from 1.0 to 2.0. So it was backward. It was compatible. And the only reason they say 2.0 is for marketing purposes. They want to say, hey, we got a new thing. But they basically add things in a compatible way continuously. and they're just putting a marker down and saying, this is Glide 2.0.
It's really
not like
1.1.
it should be. Yeah, exactly. Or could be, but it's gotten a lot better. And they did make a they did a cataclysmic change at one point where they changed the editor, but it was so much better than the other one that it was no one complained. Okay, so are they headed in the right direction? I'm going to show the first video, and then I'm going to show the second video. So here's the first video. Are you
Glide
seeing?
makes spreadsheets even more powerful,
We're good.
more
Are you good?
shareable,
Okay.
and more fun by turning
Okay,
them
this-
into
this was the
beautiful
first
custom
video.
apps that you can use for work, personal projects, and for everything in between. Here's how it works. In Glide, I click New App, pick a spreadsheet, and Glide automatically creates a basic app as a starting point. I can adjust the layout and design. I can add components that connect to the data.
Wait
in
a
my
second.
sheet.
Wait a second.
And I can add actions so users can change and update the data. The app works on phones, tablets, the web, and doesn't require an app store. The coolest thing is my app and the spreadsheet stay in sync, so changes to the spreadsheet flow directly to my app. And as different users change or upload their data, it immediately writes back to my sheet. Everything stays in sync. We can't wait to see what you build.
Okay, that took 1 minute to show. The next video.
Conveniently, it says Glide in 60 seconds.
Glide makes spreadsheets even more.
Yeah, right. How clever.
Glide is the best way
here's
for
the second
anyone to
one.
create beautiful, useful apps, even if you don't know how to code. Today, we're announcing Glide 2.0. Nearly every aspect of the product has been updated and refined, with new capabilities for apps, powerful new features for our app builder, new collaboration tools for teams, and new templates designed for work. This is the most significant update to Glide yet. Let's take a look at what's new. First of all, the apps. Over the last year, we made significant improvements to the design and functionality of the apps that you can build with Glide. We added tablet mode, so apps now adapt to devices with larger screens. Apps now feature sound effects, larger file uploads, new button styles, and improved maps. And we've added many new components, including the signature pad and a barcode scanner. There's even a fun new swipe layout. Next, the builder, where you create your apps. Glide 2.0 features a redesigned app builder with surprisingly advanced capabilities. Our built-in data editor was rewritten to be 10 times faster with smooth scrolling and new features for controlling data access. The layout editor where you build your apps now allows you to preview your app on different devices, whether that's tablet, phone, and someday desktop. Actions have evolved from simple single steps into multi-step sequences with conditional branching. You can now build complex interactions between users, your app's data, and the world. And we added a new data source that we call Glide Tables. Glide Tables are faster and more scalable than Google Sheets, and can be shared between apps to create powerful multi-app scenarios. You can still use Google Sheets if you want, but they're now optional. As they say, teamwork makes the dream work. So we added teams so everyone could build apps together. The best part is you can add as many collaborators to your team as you want for free. Just copy the magic invite link and share it with anyone in email or Slack. And soon you'll be building heaps of apps with your friends or colleagues. To help your team manage these apps, we've redesigned the dashboard to make organizing apps easier and more fun. Our final theme is improvements to apps for work. Most software is created privately for use within companies. So we worked directly with our business customers to build apps specifically for their needs. We call these apps for work. And we've made them free for anyone to copy from our template store. As a special bonus, when you copy an app for work, you'll start a 14-day trial of Glide's business tier to experience every single feature of Glide for free. The community has also been really busy, adding hundreds of templates to our template store for every use case, from running your own car wash to tracking expenses in your business, to help you start your next app even more quickly. These are just some of the many features included in the new version of Glide. To see them all, head over to glideapps.com/2.0.
Harry, can I ask a question or two?
Yeah. In fact, let me just finish out here.
Okay, sure.
So is Glide headed in the right direction? I hope so, because I believe programmers have too much influence over what get produced as applications. Too much time is spent reinventing the wheel, and not enough people get to experience the joy of programming.
That's all, folks.
Okay,
That's wonderful.
Now you
You're gonna
owe
have to cut that
royalty.
one out.
Oh, sorry
Now
about
you owe
that. No.
royalty.
That was actually on YouTube. So I
And
believe
you owe
free to use.
royalty.
It doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's free to use. We got
Oh,
nailed
okay.
on that. Can I ask a couple questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Harry, while the questions are going, just take a look at the chat. I think there were some questions in the chat as well.
Okay.
well,
Yeah,
one of
sure.
them was mine. But,
Okay, go ahead.
okay. You chose Glide. Did you discuss alternatives to Glide and why you chose Glide over the others? How
No,
long ago was this that you made?
I started using Glide last September, a year ago.
Okay.
And it took me, as I said, 6 months to create all of the Lexington by foot and phone. And that involved a whole bunch of different things, not the least of which is mastering the Google text to speech so that it sounded listenable and things of that sort.
I know how that works. And
Yep.
the other question is, what do you not get when you get the free version that you have to pay $100 for to get? And is that
Volume.
$100 a year?
It's volume that you don't get, and that's the lowest thing you can that's the lowest premium you can get up to. You can spend a lot more than that, but I held the line, and I was willing to spend $100. It's the volume of the number of things that you do, like the 5,000 rows number, and there's some other ones like that, which I think is a reasonable thing for them as an evolving organization to be able to actually do. What else?
Take a look at
Let me
the
look.
chat.
Let me look in the chat.
I have a question.
Yep.
Perhaps even more of a suggestion. And that is, if you have large blocks of text, those get very unwieldy in a spreadsheet format. Would it be a better idea to use hyperlinks instead and use documents for your text if it gets bigger?
Sure, you could do that. You could do that. Yeah, you could do that. You got to be careful about getting away from pure text as opposed to some representation of text. So, for example, if you were to get into Google Docs versus Microsoft Word versus this or that, it'll get more complex.
No, I mean unformatted text, of course.
Sure, you could do that. Mm-hmm.
When you hyperlink for web page development, usually the underlying document is unformatted text.
Yes. Yep. So somebody, Bob, asked if the user is a developer, this provides. Well, actually, I have a suggestion. Why don't people who made comments in the chat go find one of their comments and then speak it to me, because I have trouble reading and absorbing at the same time while we're on here.
I think what I was talking about in the first comment is just in general, this sort of thing. If you're going to present a development environment to users who are not programmers, it only provides satisfaction to them if the platform contains the right tools and they're presented in the right way. My counterexample is what everybody screams about with Microsoft, always changing the appearance of Windows and Office and removing features.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree that you have hit the nail on the head in terms of what do you really need to do to get to 1 billion programmers. And I don't think these guys really understand what you really need to do in order to do that. And that would be my exception to their claims. And I don't know what the answer is. It's a hard problem. How do you get someone who is maybe even math phobic, but smart enough about what they want to do to be able to do it without getting into the, I shouldn't say, I mean, their chances are they're not math phobic, because if they use spreadsheets, they probably have figured out at least the minimum amount that you need to know.
So Harry, this stuff is not new. These application builders have been around for decades on Windows
Yes.
and other platforms. And I think we have the same experience to draw on there. That sophisticated things require a programmer, a few customizations here and there. You can usually teach somebody else to do. And then there are problems that you also run into in other environments, like in corporate environments, and when you try to go worldwide, things like internationalization. How do you maintain an application where it's in different languages, different currencies, different date formats, all that stuff, maybe built into the app, maybe not. So it's proprietary, right? Is part of the truth. But it's not open source yet,
Right. But people do pay a lot for proprietary software. And I think if it does, from my perspective, I think my $100 is well spent.
No, it has value in developing a CRUD, what we call a CRUD application, a create, read, update, and delete of records out there. It's a whole area that's been around with these application builders. And it's a new iteration because it's on the web, and it's got a little bit more content like images and links and such, but essentially it's in one place, right? You don't have to install the program or whatever to do it. Yep. But it's fundamentally very similar to what's been going on for the last few decades. And when things get sophisticated, things like this can break down unless there's a big community that's authoring applications on it that one can customize. Like I was talking about the verticals, for example, before, such as real estate apps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yes, I don't take such I think there are many more people who are also interested in creating things that might not look to a heavy duty developer as worth it, but in fact is extremely valuable to them. And that's perhaps they've been unable to get this to happen. So for example, I mean, you're right about you can build all sorts of you can build all sorts of apps for verticals, and your company will get big in the real estate industry or something like that. But every once in a while, that guy in the warehouse who was trying to keep track of the kinds of plywood they have and stuff like that, and doesn't have an app and isn't in an environment that people spend money on software, might appreciate some young kid coming along and say, hey, I can build you an app to do exactly what you want out of this kind of stuff. I don't know. We'll see.
I once worked in a fast food.
CRUD applications where it's a small community and it's informal and doesn't have to be to the rigors of a corporate environment.
Yes.
Yeah. Market learning curve looks reasonable.
Yeah. So I'd like to comment a little bit further on that along, sort of Mitch's point. So for any of these sort of development, these sort of easy development environments, there's a universe of apps that they can do, and there's a bigger universe that they can't do. And it's a question of, is that universe that they can do sufficient to be really useful? So I think in any case, you could run into something where, gee, this thing works just fine. And then your users say, gee, we'd really like it to do, X. And now you say, oops, no, this doesn't let me do X. So, but you have to understand within its limitations, it's probably very, very useful.
And these days, not being able to do X, they have a lot of integrations with third-party web services, can all be put into this thing. There's a lot of stuff in there beside the stuff I showed you. So, I mean, I don't know what the limits are. I know that it's not going to be able to it's not the place you're going to want to do heavy duty compute intensive applications or things of that sort. To the extent that people have done marvelous things with spreadsheets, it can do everything that a spreadsheet can do and then some. Much better on presentation, I think. So there's, I don't know. It happens to tap into an area that I've always wanted to see happen. And I'm almost willing to sacrifice what you can do with it in favor of making it easier to do what you can do. In order to say to someone, just learn C in order to produce a graph of a table of numbers. That's a lot harder than saying, I'll show you how to do it. And come on over here, I'll show you how to do it.
Okay, so is there any way to actually look at the underlying code that Glide is generating?
No. I answer that glibly because I think if you've gotten to the point of wanting to look at the code, then this is not the system for you.
It may not even be code. It may be relationships and tables that they do dynamically do on the fly. So they data bind and so on, all these steps and so on. It may be very data driven on the internals. With the goes through, rips through all that.
Yeah, I mean, you're also talking to somebody who loves to use Weebly to program all the websites I do, because I learned HTML and CSS and everything, and I can go so much faster using Weebly, even though I can't do everything in Weebly. But I can do an awful lot, and maybe my ways should change as opposed to I don't mind changing a little bit to get it to make if it's easy to do. I'm lazy.
For example, they have a forms designer where you have a certain control over the layout, but at some point they've got to translate it into HTML or whatever needs.
Sure. And I don't care how they translate it into HTML, as long as it looks good on the screen to me. Is how my how I think of things. I don't care these days about solving efficiency issues because I have this M1 Apple processor that can run circles around what I used to do at work. I mean, it's that kind of effect. I'd much rather see the end result. That's my person.
They can handle billions of records, for example.
Well, there was a comment they made about being able to handle larger tables than Google can handle. And they put that in there at considerable expense for a good reason. They were suffering, I believe, from the performance of the Google spreadsheet. So I don't know what the absolute numbers are, but I do know that they put that in for performance reasons. They're also putting something else in they didn't talk about there, another table that's very popular. I forget which one it is, that isn't Google Sheets, but rather some other form of data, rectangular stored data.
And they said Larry has a comment that I'll let you speak in a second, Larry. I think they did in the video, they said it uses Google Sheets or Glide Sheets. They called them Glide Sheets or something.
Glide tables. That was the thing that they spent some time adding. But I also saw something else, a third one that they decided to add. And the reason they decided to add that was because there were lots of users who were using that third style of data storage, and maybe, they wanted
maybe big table. That's Google's very large.
It wasn't a Google product. It was another one. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one it is.
Was it a relational type data set, or was it with columns and rows, or was it something more like a network or hierarchical?
No, it was definitely not a network hierarchical. It was much more like a spreadsheet table kind of thing.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, we complain that there's no manuals, but Microsoft doesn't have any manuals for Office either. And if they catches on, maybe other people will come out and write a short book and make some money that way.
Well, that's right. I believe there are people in the community, and I should mention the community surrounding Glide is fanatical. I mean, these are really, they're very active. And I wouldn't be surprised to see I know a couple of the guys in the community who could write that book. And in fact, if I was interested in it, I would do it myself, because I think that's some way I could contribute to these guys, but I'm not really interested at this point. If I was younger, I might do it. Yeah.
I'm going to digress for a minute. And I think the underlying issue in terms of the challenges with this platform is that when people of our age first started programming, we were dealing with processes, and we would try to automate processes because it came out of simply process automation. We use computers for process automation. Somewhere around, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd say the 80s, all of a sudden not database, but data-centric applications became the vogue, and the software world got flipped around. And so instead of looking about if then else, which is the process, we looked at data and gave data attributes, and then what do we do with these attributes in order to affect the result? And using data, like C++ was one of the first ones of a common language that used that, which was a data-driven application language. And once we started doing that, this whole current vogue of technology has developed, and that's really where people are now. It's data-driven. We have the data, and this happens to be basically a table is a normal one database. I mean, that's really what it is. First normal database, and that's really what it is. It hasn't changed.
I sort of also, when I thought about what do they need to do, when I talk about metaphors, I think the spreadsheet as a computing model is a good example of taking the process model of how do you actually compute companies' financial records and turning it into a repeatable schema for taking a whole class of problems and figuring them out that way. I think the impact that spreadsheets had on normal people compared to is the kind of impact I'd like to see a system like this have on normal people in their ability to program a certain class of applications without having to think of themselves as programming. A lot of people use spreadsheets who would probably run away from if you told them this was programming.
And I've also seen a lot of people struggle with spreadsheets, simple things for you and me on a spreadsheet. So, you're not necessarily going to get somebody, who's, in the bookkeeping department has been, doing paper ledgers for their whole life, and give them a spreadsheet and expect them to do financial reports from it.
Right,
and all happen.
There are some concepts creeping into spreadsheets that are pretty sophisticated in terms of not dealing with scalars anymore, but rather dealing with vectors and doing vector operations, and it makes spreadsheets really powerful. Like that split operation that I did. It's take one row and replace, separate everything out in one operation. That's really great, but I realize that a lot of people won't be able to get that through their brain.
Well, go one step further. You got things called macros that are embedded in spreadsheets now, which is a little small program. That's where a lot of stuff gets done. But Larry, I think you were trying to get over that.
I was going to say I use macros. I use macros in the same thing, but I did some loudspeaker design from a mechanical point of view rather than an electrical point of view, and I use complex numbers, and it was straightforward.
Yeah, just tell that to your wife or your grandmother.
And gone are the days of VisiCalc. We all know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there are some kinds of data operations that a spreadsheet paradigm does not handle well, whereas a database paradigm handles much better. This has become a real problem in science, where people inappropriately used spreadsheets and they introduced errors into their results.
Well, Bob, understand one thing. Let's, I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier. A spreadsheet is a first normal database. End of story.
Yeah, well, again, there are database operations, particularly you run into these in science, but you can run into these in business where if you do it with a spreadsheet, you get one result. If you do it with a database and you think you're doing the same thing, it actually produces a different result.
Well,
Only one of those can be right.
A lot of times you separate out the data and the persistence and from the visual part of it. So, and this thing may have troubles, for example, with transaction committals across multiple tables, for example. That's key to the business world or for higher end apps. A lot of times the visual part is done by some sort of storyboarding, much like they do when they generate a movie, and another person can do that. And then either they got to learn the database side or the table side or mishmash the two together so it looks well and it does have the data integrity that's expected.
Yeah, I would totally agree that this ain't going to put heavy duty programmers out of business. It's just going to enable some people who feel stymied to do the things that we just consider to be keyboard macros into
for
the
departmental type stuff in the corporate world, right? You just need somebody that can show what the department wants to see.
Yeah, it's basically taking the results of the heavy duty programming and pulling them out into a visualization.
Hey, Harry, I have a. Sorry. Go ahead, Rich.
Sure, I think it was a good demonstration. My impression as a former programmer and not claiming to be good at it, but is that it fills a real niche, right? Where there's a certain level of effort they have to put in to write a program, and is the conversation, is it worth it to solve a certain problem, is a valid conversation. This lowers the bar for entry, for level of effort. Make some subset of programs, not everything in the world, but something. And the fact that they're adding templates is a huge benefit to many of the people. It'll help them address more problems closer to out of the box. I think one of the big risks to something like Glide is that as they add more features, it's going to get harder to just get started for the classical.
That's a very good observation. I found that juggling all the concepts as a new user, even though I was a pretty sophisticated programmer, I just couldn't keep them in my mind. As opposed to in the past, I would just build them myself, and of course at a slow rate.
If you need absolute performance on an embedded system or something, you're going to learn assembly or hire somebody else. This isn't that, right? This is make something look nice on a tablet. And
it is definitely.
I think that's the simple thing. I was going to actually, along those lines, ask a very selfish question, a little closer to home for this group. Harry, are you going to continue to build out that app you demoed for this group? You've built a directory of members. It's beginning. And then the other thing is the wiki is fantastic, whoever put that together, but it's not the most attractive or simple to navigate thing. So putting in the links to all of the recordings of these sessions, to be able to have that in your pocket on a phone, that's fantastic. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I actually did this. I get involved in a lot of little tiny side projects, and I look at them for a while, and then I figure out, okay, I got that one sort of, I figured it out, and then I leave it. So I probably will now. We'll see. Do some of the things I said could be done for this group. The point is I'm getting all of my information from Steve's wiki. And so, hats off to him for doing it. And there's a great example of providing a slightly better visualization of data than the text intensive wiki. Good point. What I would do now would be to take all of the talks we've given and put them like members, and I'd put some attributes on the talks as to what they're about, and we could do the same thing in terms of related talks and have that done automatically, and more importantly, done in the future incrementally without having to redo it again. In other words, to put it in the database, give the attributes, and look it up on your phone. You'll see how it how it falls out with the rest of the things.
Say you create an app with Glide. Who owns the app? Does Glide own it?
No, I do.
Okay. And you are free to use it as you
I'm
choose.
free to use it, and I'm free to sell it. They encourage me to sell it.
It's
I was
hosted
wondering
on
how
their
would they-
site.
How would
It
they
is
know?
hosted on there. Yeah,
So
how
if
would they know?
go-
Well,
They
If they go
host.
down the tubes.
They
you know, you're-
host.
that's
Yeah.
true. That's
So
true.
that's, I mean, in a way, de facto, they own it, because if they decide, well, we're getting out of this business, goodbye to your app.
That's the other
Yeah.
question. Since it's so proprietary, how would you assure that your app would have continuity, say in the event that they went out of business or merged or something?
Well, I think
you're
that would be
right.
the argument for keeping your data in an independent spreadsheet like a Google and not in their spreadsheet.
Well, maybe not even Google, because Google could also do something.
Well, they all could.
And they do.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for sticking with me and helping me out when I ran into trouble. I really appreciate your support, and
Nice job, Harry.
I'll
Thank you so
send you some
much.
more
Thanks, Harry.
stuff about it. Yep.
Good job,
That's
Harry.
great.
Thank you so
Thank you, Harry.
much.